The elevator doors slid open on the 47th floor of Hartwell Tower. Marcus Hartwell stepped out first, his Italian leather shoes clicking against polished marble. 3 executives trailed behind him, their laughter echoing off glass walls that overlooked Manhattan's skyline. Then Marcus stopped. His smile widened into something sharp. "Well, what do we have here?" Grace Okonkwo knelt in the hallway, head bowed, hands clasped. Her lips moved silently. Her emerald green blazer contrasted against the cold white stone beneath her knees. She'd arrived early for her annual review. She always prayed before important moments. "Praying won't save your job, sweetheart." Marcus's voice boomed through the corridor. The executives snickered. One pulled out his phone. The camera light blinked red. Grace's eyes opened slowly. She looked up. Marcus stood above her, arms crossed, his royal blue tie perfectly knotted. His expression held no malice, just amusement, as if he'd discovered a child playing pretend. "This is a Fortune 500 company," he continued, turning to his audience. "Not a revival tent." The executives laughed louder now. Employees emerged from nearby offices, drawn by the commotion. Grace rose to her feet, brushing invisible dust from her skirt. Her face remained calm. She said nothing. Marcus walked past her, his shoulder nearly grazing hers. "Conference room B, 5 minutes, don't be late." The crowd dispersed. Phones disappeared into pockets. The hallway emptied within seconds, leaving Grace alone beneath the fluorescent lights. Her reflection stared back from the glass walls, small, dark-skinned, unshaken. She exhaled slowly. Her grandmother's voice whispered in memory. "When they mock your faith, child, they reveal their fear." Grace checked her watch. 4 minutes remained. Grace Okonkwo had worked at Hartwell Global for 6 years. She was 34, a senior contract analyst in the legal compliance division. Her cubicle sat in the northwest corner of the 43rd floor, wedged between the copy room and a window that overlooked the Hudson River. She'd earned her position through night classes at Cooney School of Law, juggling coursework with single motherhood after her husband died in a construction accident. Her daughter Maya was 9 now, bright, curious, obsessed with astronomy. Grace kept Maya's crayon drawing of the solar system taped to her monitor. Beside it sat a framed photograph, her grandmother, Dorothy Okonkwo, in white church robes. Dorothy had raised Grace after her parents returned to Nigeria. She'd been a paralegal for 40 years, teaching Grace to read contracts the way other grandmothers taught recipes. "Every clause is a weapon or a shield," Dorothy would say, her finger tracing dense legal text. "Never sign what you don't understand." Grace had inherited that precision. At Hartwell Global, she reviewed merger agreements, acquisition contracts, partnership terms. She caught errors others missed, misplaced decimals that could cost millions, loopholes that could trigger lawsuits. Her work was flawless, but in Marcus Hartwell's world of inherited wealth and Ivy League networks, flawless wasn't enough. She was invisible. Her ideas were attributed to male colleagues. Her promotions stalled despite exemplary reviews. She existed in the margins, necessary but unacknowledged. Until today, when Marcus Hartwell made her visible in the worst possible way. Grace walked toward Conference Room B, her heels silent on thick carpet. She carried a folder containing her annual self-assessment, a document she'd spent weeks perfecting. She'd highlighted 3 major contract errors she'd identified, saving the company over $8 million. She reached the door. Voices murmured inside. Grace straightened her blazer, touched the small gold cross at her throat, and entered. Marcus sat at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by HR Director Patricia Vance and CFO Raymond Cole. The room smelled of expensive cologne and cold coffee. "Sit," Marcus said without looking up from his tablet. Grace sat. She placed her folder on the table, hands folded over it. The silence stretched. Patricia shuffled papers. Raymond cleared his throat. Finally, Marcus looked at her. "Do you know why you're here, Grace?" "My annual review," she answered steadily. "Wrong." He tapped his tablet. "You're here because you demonstrated inappropriate behavior in a professional environment." Grace's stomach tightened. "I don't understand." Marcus turned the tablet toward her. The video played, Grace kneeling, Marcus laughing, the executive's sneers. The timestamp showed 14 minutes ago. The view count already exceeded 50,000. "Social media moves fast," Marcus said, "especially when content is entertaining." The video had been posted to Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every platform simultaneously. The caption read, "Billionaire CEO Marcus Hartwell destroys employee praying at work." Power move or too far? Grace watched herself rise from the floor, watched her own measured composure. The comments section scrolled beneath, hundreds of responses flooding in by the second. This is workplace discrimination. She's just trying to get attention. Sue him. Praying at work is unprofessional, he's right. Patricia Vance leaned forward, her voice carefully neutral. "Grace, we need to discuss company policy regarding religious expression in common areas." "I've worked here 6 years, Grace said quietly. "I've prayed before every major presentation, every review, every deadline. No one ever objected." "No one ever filmed it before," Marcus interjected. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Here's the situation. This video makes Hartwell Global look like a company that tolerates religious theater in professional spaces. Our investors, many of whom represent secular interests, are already calling." Raymond Cole adjusted his glasses. "The optics are complicated, Grace. We're concerned about—" "Fire her," Marcus interrupted. "Effective immediately." Patricia's pen froze mid-note. "Marcus, we need to follow protocol. There's a process. I'm the CEO. I am the process." Marcus's voice hardened. "Grace Okonkwo is terminated for creating a hostile work environment through inappropriate religious displays. Security will escort her out. She has 1 hour to collect her belongings." Grace's hands gripped the folder. Her voice remained steady. "This is wrongful termination." Marcus smiled. "This is business. You're free to pursue legal action if you feel wronged. Hartwell Global has the best legal team in the country. They'll bury you in motions for years." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Patricia, draft the paperwork. Raymond, prepare a statement for the press." He walked to the door, paused, and looked back at Grace. "A word of advice? Keep your religion at home. The real world doesn't care about your prayers." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Patricia's expression was pained. "Grace, I'm so sorry. I'll ensure you receive severance." "Don't." Grace stood, gathering her folder. "Don't apologize for him." She walked out of conference room B for the last time. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Texts from colleagues who'd seen the video, some supportive, some silent. She ignored them all. Security met her at her cubicle. A young guard named Marcus, ironically, looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I need to escort you." Grace packed quickly, her grandmother's photo, Maya's solar system drawing, a coffee mug that read. Nevertheless, she persisted. She left everything else, the awards, the commendations, the proof of 6 years' excellence. The walk to the elevator felt endless. Employees stared or looked away. No one spoke. Grace kept her head high, her cross glinting under fluorescent lights. In the lobby, a news crew waited. A reporter thrust a microphone forward. "Ms. Okonkwo, do you have a comment on your termination?" Grace pushed past them, into the autumn air, into the anonymity of the Manhattan crowd. Her car was parked 3 blocks away. She walked mechanically, her mind strangely blank. She didn't cry. Not yet. Grace sat in her Toyota Camry outside Maya's school, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. The parent-teacher conference had ended 20 minutes ago. Ms. Rodriguez had praised Maya's science project. Grace had smiled, nodded, signed forms. Now alone she felt the cracks forming. Her phone lit up constantly. News alerts, Twitter mentions, LinkedIn messages. The video had gone viral. Prayergate trended nationwide. Think pieces appeared. Religious freedom versus corporate culture. Who's right? Talking heads debated her dignity on cable news. Grace silenced the phone. She stared at the school playground where Maya climbed monkey bars with friends, her laughter carrying across the asphalt. Grace had promised her daughter stability after her father's death. She'd promised safety, education, a future built on hard work and faith. Now she was unemployed, publicly humiliated. A meme. The passenger door opened. Maya slid in, backpack thudding against the seat. "Mom, Ms. Rodriguez said my Mars model was the best in class." Her smile faltered. "Mom? You okay?" Grace blinked. "I'm perfect, baby. Let's go home." The drive was silent. Maya sensed something wrong but didn't press. She was learning when to give her mother space. That knowledge made Grace's chest ache. At home, a modest two-bedroom apartment in Queens, Grace made dinner mechanically, spaghetti with turkey meatballs, Maya's favorite. They ate while Maya chatted about school, about her friend Jasmine's birthday party, about a documentary on black holes. Grace washed dishes, tucked Maya into bed, read 3 chapters of A Wrinkle in Time, kissed her daughter's forehead. Then she sat alone in the kitchen, lights dimmed, laptop open. The termination email glowed on screen. Effective immediately. Violation of professional conduct standards. Severance details attached. Grace's hands trembled. Shame burned through her chest, not for praying but for being seen, for being made small in front of the world, for her daughter having to see her mother mocked and dismissed. Then anger arrived, cold and clarifying. She replayed Marcus's words, "Praying won't save your job." His smile. His certainty. His absolute conviction that he was untouchable. Grace's grandmother had died 5 years ago, her last words a warning. Powerful men forget that paper holds more power than pride. Remember that, child. Grace opened her work email before IT could lock her out. She had maybe 6 hours before access terminated. She navigated to archived files, documents most employees never touched. Incorporation papers, founding agreements, historical contracts from when Marcus's father built Hartwell Global in the 1980s. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced speed. She'd reviewed thousands of contracts. She knew where secrets hid. Somewhere in this digital labyrinth was a weapon. She just had to find it. Grace was 16 when her grandmother lost their home. A predatory lender had buried trap clauses in the refinancing agreement, balloon payments, variable interest rates that tripled without warning. Dorothy Okonkwo had signed, desperate to repair a collapsing roof. Within 2 years they were evicted. Grace remembered sitting on the courthouse steps while Dorothy wept silently, too proud to sob aloud. An older woman, a paralegal for 40 years, undone by fine print she'd missed. The shame had carved itself into Dorothy's face, deepening every line. That night, Dorothy spread the contract on their kitchen table in her sister's cramped apartment. "Come here, Grace," she said quietly. Grace sat. Dorothy traced the document with a yellow highlighter, her hands steady now. "See this? Clause 7.3a. Mandatory arbitration. I couldn't even fight in real court. And here Section 12, acceleration clause. 1 missed payment triggers full loan demand." She looked at Grace. "I missed this. I was tired. I trusted the nice man in the suit." "It's not your fault, Grandma." "Yes, it is." Dorothy's voice was firm. I had the training. I got lazy, and laziness in contracts costs everything. She pushed the document toward Grace. Read it. Every word. Tell me what else I missed, Grace read. She was 16, exhausted from school and her part-time job at the grocery store. But she read. She found 4 more trap clauses. Dorothy nodded at each discovery, her expression proud and devastated. You have the gift, Dorothy said finally. You see what others miss. Promise me you'll use it. You'll never let someone's pride or power make you lazy, Grace promised. She studied contract law at community college while working full-time. She became a paralegal, then an analyst. She met David Okonkwo, a construction foreman with gentle hands and a laugh that filled rooms. They married. She got pregnant with Maya. Then David fell. 30 stories, an unsecured beam on a Hartwell Global construction project. The settlement was buried in NDAs and liability waivers. Grace was 28, widowed, with a newborn. She accepted Hartwell's job offer in their legal department because she needed the health insurance, because Maya needed stability, because she'd promised her grandmother she'd use her gift. For 6 years she'd been the best analyst Hartwell Global employed. She'd saved them from lawsuits, from regulatory fines, from catastrophic oversights. She'd worked quietly, brilliantly, waiting for the right moment to matter. Marcus Hartwell had just given her that moment. Grace scrolled through archived files, her eyes scanning hundreds of pages per minute. She knew Hartwell Global's structure intimately, every subsidiary, every acquisition, every partnership. She'd reviewed most of these contracts herself over the years, but the founding documents were different. They predated her tenure, written when Marcus's father, Harrison Hartwell, built the company from a small real estate firm into a global conglomerate. Harrison had been religious, Methodist church elder, deeply involved in faith-based charities. Grace pulled up the original incorporation agreement from 1987, 83 pages. She'd never read it before. No one had probably in decades. She started at page 1. Grace read through dawn. Maya woke at 7, ate cereal, caught the school bus. Grace barely noticed. Her eyes burned. Her coffee went cold. Page 47 revealed something interesting, a list of original investors. Harrison Hartwell owned 51%. The remaining 49% was split among 3 entities, faith-based foundations. Grace recognized the names: the Covenant Foundation, Grace and Mercy Trust Shepherds Alliance, religious charities that funded ethical businesses in the 1980s. She cross-referenced current shareholder records. The 3 foundations still held their original shares. They'd never sold. Most modern investors didn't even know they existed. Their stakes were grandfathered into the corporate structure, silent and forgotten. Grace's pulse quickened. She kept reading. Page 62 contained employment policies from the original agreement. Standard provisions, anti-discrimination, workplace safety, benefit structures. She almost skipped past it. Then she saw it. Clause 14.7b, Employee Religious Expression Protections. Her hands froze on the keyboard. No employee of Hartwell Global, Inc. shall be terminated, demoted, or otherwise penalized for religious expression or practice conducted on company premises, provided such expression does not materially disrupt business operations. Any termination involving religious expression must be approved by majority vote of the Board of Directors, with documented cause submitted in writing no less than 30 days prior to termination. Grace read it 3 times. Then she searched for amendments. None. The clause remained in every subsequent operating agreement, copied verbatim through mergers and restructuring. It appeared in last year's shareholder prospectus, page 247, unchanged. But there was more. She scrolled to section 22, Investor Rights and Remedies. In the event of violation of clause 14.7b, original investors reserve the right to call an emergency board meeting and invoke remedial measures, including but not limited to immediate reinstatement of affected employee, Financial penalties or recall of invested capital. Capital recall. Grace's heart hammered. If the foundations invoked that right, they could withdraw their shares. 49% of Hartwell Global's foundational equity gone. The company would collapse under the sudden debt restructuring required to buy them out. Marcus Hartwell had publicly violated Clause 14.7b. With video evidence, no board vote, no documentation, no 30-day notice. He'd destroyed himself and didn't even know it. Grace screenshot every page. She saved files to 3 separate cloud accounts. She printed hard copies despite the risk of alerting IT. Her laptop screen dimmed, a warning. Her access was terminating in 15 minutes. She worked faster, compiling a complete evidence package. The original incorporation agreement, the viral video, Marcus's public statement. Religious theater has no place in professional environments. Her termination email, stamped with Patricia Vance's digital signature, but clearly drafted by Marcus, 14 minutes. 13:12, Grace exported everything. Her screen went black at precisely 9 a.m. System access revoked. She sat back, hands shaking. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Miss Okonkwo, this is David Chen from Chen & Associates Civil Rights Law. I saw the video. I'd like to speak with you about representation. No fee unless we win. Grace stared at the message. Then at the printed contract stacked beside her laptop. Then at her grandmother's photograph on the mantel. Every clause is a weapon or a shield. She picked up her phone and typed, Mr. Chen, I'd like to meet. I have documentation you'll want to see. The reply came instantly. My office? 2 p.m. today. Bring everything. Grace stood. She showered. She dressed in her best suit, the emerald green blazer, a white blouse, black slacks. She braided her hair with the same care she'd used before yesterday's review. In the mirror she looked different, sharper. Her grandmother's eyes stared back at her. Grace smiled slowly. Marcus Hartwell had mocked her prayer. He'd called her faith weakness. He was about to learn the difference between power and invincibility. She grabbed her evidence folder and walked out the door. David Chen's office occupied the 3rd floor of a brownstone in Brooklyn. Nothing like Hartwell Tower's glass and steel. Chen himself was 42, Chinese-American, with a reputation for taking cases bigger firms wouldn't touch. He'd sued police departments, Fortune 500 companies, government agencies. He also lost frequently. But when he won big. Grace sat across from him in a cramped conference room that smelled like old books and fresh coffee. She laid out the contracts. Chen read silently, his expression shifting from skepticism to focus to something like awe. This is real, he asked finally. Clause 14.7b is in the current operating agreement, page 247, signed by Marcus Hartwell himself last April. Chen leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. And the capital recall provision? Section 22. Original investors can pull their shares if the clause is violated. How much equity are we talking about? 49% of the company's foundational capital. Roughly $1.2 billion in current valuation. Chen whistled softly. If they recall, Hartwell Global would need to restructure or face bankruptcy. He looked at Grace with new respect. You found this yourself? I'm a contract analyst, She corrected herself bitterly. You're about to be much more than that. Chen started typing on his laptop. We file for wrongful termination, citing religious discrimination. We cite Clause 14.7b as contractual proof of policy violation. We request emergency injunction for reinstatement. And we notify the 3 foundations of their rights under Section 22. Grace's stomach tightened. Will it work? Honestly? I don't know. Hartwell's legal team is Whitfield and Crane, the best money can buy. They'll argue the clause is archaic, unenforceable, superseded by at-will employment standards. He met her eyes. This will get ugly, Grace. They'll investigate your entire life, every financial record, every relationship, every mistake. They'll paint you as opportunistic, vindictive, a liar. Can you handle that? Grace thought of Maya, of her grandmother, of David's broken body and the settlement that had silenced her grief. Yes, Chen nodded. Then let's make them wish they'd never laughed. They filed on Friday. By Monday, the story exploded. Prayergate evolved into Duck Claws Gate. Legal analysts on CNN debated enforceability. Religious groups rallied. Atheist organizations counter-protested. Grace's face appeared on every news channel. Marcus Hartwell held a press conference, his smile unwavering. This is a nuisance lawsuit from a disgruntled former employee. Hartwell Global operates within all legal guidelines. We look forward to swift dismissal. Whitfield and Crane offered a settlement, $50,000 and an NDA. Grace refused. They offered $100,000. She refused. They offered $250,000 and a written apology. Grace's answer, delivered through Chen, "See you in court." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Wednesday morning. Grace arrived at the courthouse flanked by David Chen and a security guard Chen had hired after someone vandalized Grace's car. Inside, the gallery was packed. Journalists, activists, curious spectators. Marcus Hartwell sat at the defendant's table, surrounded by 5 lawyers in identical navy suits. He looked bored. Judge Margaret Reyes entered, a stern Latina woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. Counsel approach. Chen presented the case. Wrongful termination, religious discrimination, contractual violation. Hartwell's lead attorney, Gerald Whitfield, countered with motions to dismiss based on at-will employment doctrine. Your Honor, Whitfield said smoothly, Clause 14.7b predates modern employment law. It's a relic from a different era, unenforceable under current standards. Judge Reyes looked at Chen. Response? Chen gestured to Grace. Your Honor, my client would like to address the court directly. Reyes raised an eyebrow. Ms. Okonkwo, you're not an attorney. No, Your Honor, but I am a senior contract analyst with 6 years' experience reviewing Hartwell Global's legal documents. I'd like to present evidence. Reyes considered. Brief presentation only, proceed. Grace stood, her hands steady despite her racing pulse. She approached the bench with a folder. Your Honor, opposing counsel claims Clause 14.7b is archaic and unenforceable. However, it appears in Hartwell Global's current operating agreement, signed by CEO Marcus Hartwell on April 15th of last year. She presented the document, a yellow tab marking page 247. Whitfield's expression flickered. Just for a second, Grace continued. The clause is not only enforceable, it was deliberately maintained through multiple restructurings. Mr. Hartwell himself affirmed its validity by signing this document. Judge Reyes examined the page. The courtroom held its breath. Mr. Whitfield, Reyes said slowly, is this accurate? Whitfield stood. Your Honor, the document contains hundreds of legacy clauses that... Is it accurate? Reyes repeated, a pause. Then, yes, Your Honor, the gallery erupted. Reyes banged her gavel. Order. Grace returned to her seat. Chen squeezed her shoulder briefly. A silent acknowledgement. Judge Reyes set the document down. I'm ordering a full evidentiary hearing. Mr. Whitfield, your client will produce all relevant employment policies and board meeting records. Ms. Okonkwo, you'll provide documentation of the termination process. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Hartwell, I suggest you take this seriously. Dismissed. The gavel fell outside, reporters swarmed. Chen handled questions while Grace slipped into a waiting car. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're making a mistake. Drop this and I'll reinstate you with a raise. Keep pushing and I'll destroy you. Mate Grace deleted it. She looked out the window at Manhattan's skyline. Hartwell Tower visible in the distance, its glass facade reflecting the afternoon sun. Her grandmother's voice whispered, "Paper holds more power than pride." Grace allowed herself a small smile. The threat started that night. Anonymous emails flooded Grace's inbox. Graphic, vile, promising violence. Someone posted her home address on a conspiracy forum. A brick shattered her living room window at 2 a.m. with a note attached. "Shut up or else." Grace called the police. They took a report and left. Chen arranged for security cameras and a panic button. Maya slept in Grace's bed, frightened by the noise and broken glass. "Mom, why are people mad at you?" Maya asked in the darkness. Grace held her daughter closer. "'Cause I told the truth. And sometimes truth makes people uncomfortable. Like when I told Mr. Peterson that his science lesson was wrong. Exactly like that. You got in trouble too." "Yes, baby. But it's going to be okay." Grace hoped she wasn't lying. The next day, Chen called with bad news. "Grace, we have a problem. The three foundations, Covenant, Grace and Mercy, Shepherd's Alliance, they're not responding. I've sent certified letters, emails, phone calls, nothing. Why would they ignore this? I don't know. But without their participation, we can't invoke the capital recall provision. Our case weakens significantly." Grace's stomach sank. "What do we do?" "I'm flying to their headquarters personally. Covenant is in Boston, Grace and Mercy in Philadelphia, Shepherd's Alliance in Atlanta. I'll make them listen." Chen paused. "Grace, there's something else. My firm received a call from Whitfield and Crane. They offered me a partnership if I drop your case." Silence. "I told them no." Chen continued quickly. "But I need you to know, this is the kind of pressure they'll apply everywhere. To witnesses, to judges, to media outlets. They're going to squeeze until something breaks. What do you need from me? Keep doing what you're doing. Be visible. Be unshakable. And don't talk to anyone from Hartwell Global. Not Marcus, not HR, not former colleagues. They're building a narrative that you're difficult, vindictive, a troublemaker. Don't give them ammunition." Grace agreed. She hung up and stared at her shattered window, now covered with cardboard and duct tape. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. 15 times in 10 minutes. Finally she answered. "Hello? Grace." Marcus Hartwell's voice was smooth, almost friendly. "We should talk in person. There's information you don't have. I have nothing to say to you. Not even about your husband, about what really happened on that construction site." Grace's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" "Meet me tonight. The courtyard outside Hartwell Tower, 9 p.m. Come alone or you'll never know the truth." The line went dead. Grace sat frozen, the phone trembling in her hand. David Chen's voice echoed, "Don't talk to anyone from Hartwell Global." But Marcus had mentioned David, her husband. The accident that had stolen him from her and Maya. What truth? Grace looked at the clock, 6:47 p.m. She had 2 hours to decide. She thought of her daughter sleeping in the next room, of her grandmother's warning about powerful men, of the clause that could end Marcus's empire. She thought of David's laugh, his gentle hands, the way he died, sudden, brutal, unexplained. Grace grabbed her coat and keys. She left a note for the neighbor watching Maya. Emergency. Back soon. She drove toward Manhattan, toward Hartwell Tower, toward whatever truth Marcus Hartwell held like a knife. The city lights blurred past her window. Her heart hammered. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, but she drove anyway. At 8:55 p.m., Grace parked 3 blocks from Hartwell Tower. She walked slowly, scanning for cameras, for witnesses, for exits. The courtyard was empty, a modern space of concrete benches and geometric fountains, deserted at night. Marcus stood in the center, hands in his pockets. He wore casual clothes, jeans, a black sweater, no tie. He looked almost human. "You came," he said. Grace stopped 10 feet away. "You have 2 minutes." Marcus smiled. "Your husband's death wasn't an accident, Grace. The beam that fell. Someone cut the safety cables the night before." "Do you know who?" Grace's world tilted. "You're lying, am I?" He pulled out his phone, swiped, and held it toward her. "This is a surveillance photo from the construction site. October 12, 2019, the night before David died. Grace stepped closer, squinting at the screen. The image showed a man in a safety vest, cutting through cable with heavy shears. The face was blurry but recognizable. Raymond Cole, Hartwell Global's CFO. Why? Grace whispered. Insurance fraud. The project was behind schedule and over budget. A fatal accident would trigger delay forgiveness clauses and a payout. Raymond was desperate. He'd been embezzling and needed to cover his tracks. Marcus pocketed his phone. I found out 6 months ago. I've been sitting on it. Why tell me now? Marcus's smile vanished. Because you're about to destroy my company over a prayer. I could destroy you with the truth about David's death, make you look like you've been seeking revenge all along, that this lawsuit is really about your husband, or... He stepped closer. You drop the suit. You disappear, and I give you this evidence to prosecute Raymond Cole properly. Justice for David, peace for you and Maya. Grace's mind raced. Raymond Cole had killed her husband. This photo could send him to prison, but using it meant abandoning her case, letting Marcus win, betraying every principle her grandmother taught her. I need time, she said. You have until tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Withdraw the suit or I leak a story that you've been planning this vendetta for years. I'll paint David as complicit in the fraud, you as a bitter widow. I'll bury you both. Marcus walked past her, pausing at her shoulder. Choose wisely, Grace. Some battles aren't worth winning. He disappeared into the night. Grace stood alone in the empty courtyard, the city's noise distant and hollow. Her phone buzzed. David Chen calling, probably wondering where she was. She didn't answer. She looked up at Hartwell Tower, its lights glowing against the dark sky. Somewhere in that building, Raymond Cole worked late, unaware that his secret had just become her burden. Grace thought of Maya, of David, of her grandmother, of the clause that could end an empire. She thought of Marcus Hartwell's smug certainty that she would fold, and she realized something terrifying. She didn't know what choice she'd make. The fountain behind her burbled softly. The city breathed around her. Grace stood frozen between justice and revenge, between truth and tactics, between the woman she was and the woman she needed to become. Her phone buzzed again. She silenced it. Then she walked back to her car, her mind a storm of impossible choices. Grace didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the printed contracts and the business card Marcus had slipped into her coat pocket. It contained only a phone number, his private line, she assumed. By dawn, her phone had 43 missed calls. David Chen, news outlets, unknown numbers. She ignored them all. Maya woke at 7, dressed herself, ate cereal in silence. She'd learned to read her mother's moods. Mom, you okay? Grace forced a smile. I'm fine, baby. Just tired. You're always tired now. Maya's voice was small. Is it because of the mean man on TV? Grace's chest tightened. She knelt before her daughter, taking both small hands in hers. Listen to me. What's happening right now is hard, but we're going to be okay. I promise. You promised that when Daddy died too. The words hung between them. Maya's eyes filled with tears she was too proud to let fall. She was 9 years old and already learning that promises break. Grace pulled her daughter close. You're right, I did. And we made it through, didn't we? We're still here, still fighting, still together. Maya nodded against her mother's shoulder. Grace held her until the school bus horn sounded outside. After Maya left, Grace sat in the empty apartment. The silence pressed down like physical weight. Her phone buzzed, Chen again. She let it ring. She thought about Raymond Cole's face in that surveillance photo. The casual efficiency of his cable cutting. The calculation required to murder a man for money. She thought about David's funeral. His mother's wails. Maya's small hand gripping hers during the burial. The settlement check that had felt like blood money even before she knew the truth. Grace walked to her bedroom closet and pulled out a box she hadn't opened in years. David's things, his watch, his wallet, his wedding ring. Beneath them, the accident report from OSHA. Equipment failure due to inadequate safety protocols. No criminal negligence found. Lies, all lies. Her phone rang again. This time she answered. Chen. Grace. Where have you been? I've been calling for hours. I met with Marcus Hartwell last night. Silence. Then you did what? Grace told him everything. The surveillance photo. Raymond Cole, the ultimatum. Chen listened without interrupting. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. Grace, this could be fabricated. Marcus is desperate. He'd manufacture evidence to make you drop the suit. What if it's real? Then we investigate properly. Through legal channels. Not by making deals with the man who's trying to destroy you. Chen's voice softened. I know you want justice for David, but this isn't the way. What is the way? Grace's voice cracked. I have until 9 a.m. to decide. Withdraw the suit and maybe get justice for my husband, or keep fighting and let his killer walk free. Those aren't your only options, aren't they? Chen paused. Grace, I'm in Boston right now. I'm meeting with the Covenant Foundation at 10. If they agree to invoke Section 22, we won't need Marcus's approval or cooperation. We'll have the power to force a board vote, to restructure the company, to expose everyone involved in your husband's death. But I need you to hold on. Can you do that? Grace looked at her grandmother's photograph. Dorothy Okonkwo stared back with knowing eyes. Yes, Grace whispered. I can hold on. Good, don't call Marcus. Don't respond to his threats. Let me handle this. Chen hung up. Grace sat in her grandmother's rocking chair, the one piece of furniture she'd kept from the eviction. She rocked slowly, the wood creaking beneath her. Outside, the city woke to another ordinary day. People caught trains, bought coffee, lived lives uncomplicated by impossible choices. Grace closed her eyes and prayed. Not for guidance this time, just for strength. David Chen stood in the reception area of the Covenant Foundation, a modest office in downtown Boston. The walls held photographs of community projects, schools built, wells dug, families fed. This was not a wealthy organization. It was a faithful one. A woman in her 60s emerged from a back office. Mr. Chen? I'm Director Okoye. Please, come in. Chen followed her into a conference room where two others waited, an elderly white man with kind eyes and a young black woman with a laptop. I'm Pastor Williams, the man said, shaking Chen's hand. And this is our legal counsel, Amara Diop. Chen laid out his case. He showed them the viral video, Clause 14.7b, the termination documentation. He explained Section 22 and their power to invoke capital recall. Director Okoye watched the video in silence. When Marcus's laughter echoed from Chen's laptop, she closed her eyes. We've seen this, she said quietly. It's been haunting us since it went viral. Then why haven't you responded? Chen asked. Grace Okonkwo has been trying to reach you for weeks. Pastor Williams exchanged glances with Director Okoye. Mr. Chen, the Covenant Foundation has held shares in Hartwell Global for 38 years. Harrison Hartwell was a good man, faithful, honest, committed to ethical business. When he died and his son took over, things changed. We've watched Marcus strip away every value his father built, but you never divested, Chen observed. We couldn't afford to, Amara Diop interjected. Our shares represent 40% of our endowment. Selling would devastate our programs worldwide. We've been trapped, watching Marcus Hartwell corrupt everything we stand for, unable to act without destroying ourselves. Until now, Director Okoye said. When we saw that video, we consulted our board. We reviewed the original investment agreement. Clause 14.7b isn't just about protecting employees. It's about protecting the soul of the company. Marcus violated it publicly, arrogantly. If we don't act now, we become complicit. Chen leaned forward. So you'll invoke Section 22? We will, Pastor Williams confirmed. But we need the other two foundations. Grace and Mercy and Shepherd's Alliance. If all three of us recall our capital simultaneously, Marcus will have no choice but to restructure or face bankruptcy. One foundation alone isn't enough leverage. I'm meeting with Grace and Mercy this afternoon in Philadelphia. Shepherd's Alliance tomorrow in Atlanta. We'll coordinate, Amara said. If they agree, we call an emergency board meeting within 72 hours. We invoke Section 22 publicly. We force a vote on Marcus's removal as CEO. Chen felt hope spark in his chest. And Grace Okonkwo? She'll be reinstated with full back pay and a formal apology, Director Okoye said firmly. But more than that, she'll be protected. Covenant Foundation will ensure Marcus can never retaliate against her again. They shook hands. Chen left Boston with renewed purpose. Grace and Mercy Trust in Philadelphia was more cautious. Their director, a nervous accountant named Herbert Mills, initially refused the meeting. Chen camped in their lobby for 3 hours until Mills relented. "This is too risky," Mills kept saying. "We could lose everything." "You're losing everything already," Chen countered. "Your investment is tied to a company led by a man who mocks faith publicly. How long before that damages your reputation? Before donors ask why you're funding him?" Mills wavered. Finally, reluctantly, he agreed to present Chen's case to his board. Shepherd's Alliance in Atlanta was the surprise. Their director, a fierce woman named Reverend Tasha Monroe, listened to Chen's presentation with arms crossed. When he finished, she smiled. "Took you long enough. We've been waiting for someone to have the courage to use Section 22. Marcus Hartwell is exactly what's wrong with modern capitalism. All greed, no grace. Tell Grace Okonkwo she has our full support." By Thursday evening, Chen had commitments from all 3 foundations. He called Grace from the Atlanta airport. "We have them," he said simply. Grace, sitting in her apartment with Maya asleep beside her, let out a breath she'd been holding for days. "All 3?" "All 3. Emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday morning. They're invoking Section 22 and calling for Marcus's removal. Grace, we're going to win." Grace felt tears slide down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly. "What about Raymond Cole?" "The surveillance photo. We'll handle that separately. I've already contacted the district attorney's office. If Marcus's photo is legitimate, Cole will face murder charges. If it's fabricated, Marcus faces evidence tampering charges. Either way, justice gets served." "Thank you," Grace whispered. "Thank your grandmother. She taught you to read contracts. That's what's saving you." After hanging up, Grace sat in the darkness of her living room. She thought about the hallway where Marcus had mocked her. She thought about her knees on cold marble, her quiet prayer, her unshakable faith. She thought about Dorothy Okonkwo's voice. "When they mock your faith, child, they reveal their fear." Marcus Hartwell was afraid. He'd been afraid from the beginning. Afraid of accountability, of legacy, of the paper trail his father left behind. Grace wasn't afraid anymore. She opened her laptop and composed an email to David Chen. "I'm ready for Monday. Let's finish this." The emergency board meeting convened in Hartwell Tower's executive conference room, a space designed to intimidate with its floor-to-ceiling windows and obsidian table. 23 board members sat in leather chairs. Marcus Hartwell occupied the head, flanked by Gerald Whitfield and Raymond Cole. Grace entered with David Chen. Every head turned. Whispers rippled through the room. Marcus's smile was tight. "Ms. Okonkwo, Mr. Chen, this is a closed board meeting." "Not anymore." Director Okoye stood from her seat near the middle. "Under Section 22 of the original investment agreement, affected parties may attend emergency sessions. Ms. Okonkwo is the affected party." Reverend Monroe stood next. "Furthermore, the Covenant Foundation, Grace and Mercy Trust, and Shepherd's Alliance are invoking our rights under Section 22. We're calling a vote on CEO removal and company restructuring." The room erupted. Board members shouted questions. Marcus banged his gavel. "This is absurd. You can't invoke a 40-year-old clause." "We can and we are," Pastor Williams said calmly. You violated Clause 14.7b publicly and deliberately. You terminated Ms. Okonkwo without board approval, without documentation, without cause. You mocked her faith on camera. You've disgraced everything your father built. Marcus's face flushed red. My father was a fool who let religious sentimentality contaminate business decisions. I've spent 15 years cleaning up his mess. Is that what you call it? Grace's voice cut through the noise. The room fell silent. She stood, every eye on her. I worked for you for 6 years, Mr. Hartwell. I saved your company millions. I caught errors your expensive lawyers missed. I was loyal, diligent, excellent, and you humiliated me because I prayed. Her voice strengthened. But this isn't about hurt feelings. This is about integrity. She nodded to Chen, who projected a document on the screen. The original incorporation agreement. Clause 14.7b highlighted. Your father wrote this clause because he believed business without faith becomes predatory. He built Hartwell Global on a foundation of ethics. You've been standing on that foundation while setting it on fire. Marcus leaned back, arms crossed. Inspiring speech. But you're forgetting something. I own 51% of this company. You can invoke whatever clauses you want. I still have controlling interest. Not if we withdraw our capital, Director Okoye said quietly. Collectively, our 3 foundations hold 49% of foundational equity, $1.2 billion. If we recall simultaneously, Hartwell Global must restructure to maintain solvency. The banks will demand new terms. Your personal shares will be diluted. You'll lose control. Marcus's lawyer Whitfield stood quickly. Your Honor, I mean, Mr. Chairman, this is economic blackmail. You can't— We can, Reverend Monroe interrupted. It's written clearly in Section 22.3. Original investors maintain recall rights in perpetuity as protection against ethical violations. This is exactly the scenario Harrison Hartwell anticipated. Raymond Cole whispered urgently in Marcus's ear. Marcus's jaw clenched. Grace pulled out her phone. There's something else you should know, Mr. Hartwell. You offered me a deal. Drop the lawsuit in exchange for evidence about my husband's death. Evidence implicating Mr. Cole. Raymond Cole went pale. The board members leaned forward. You showed me a surveillance photo suggesting Raymond cut safety cables the night before my husband died. You called it insurance fraud. You offered me justice if I stayed quiet. Grace's voice hardened. But I did some research. That photo, taken from an angle only accessible to executive security cameras. Cameras controlled by your office. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You knew, Grace continued. You knew Raymond murdered my husband. You knew for years. And you protected him, because he helped you embezzle funds from the construction division, funds your father designated for ethical sourcing and fair labor. The room exploded. Board members shouted. Raymond Cole stood abruptly. That's a lie, is it? Chen pulled out another document. This is a forensic audit commissioned by the Covenant Foundation last week. It traces irregular fund transfers from the construction division to offshore accounts controlled by Marcus Hartwell and Raymond Cole. $18 million over 8 years. Akus slammed his hand on the table. You have no authority to audit. We have every authority, Pastor Williams said. We're shareholders. When ethical violations are suspected, we can demand transparency. It's in Section 9.4. Grace watched Marcus's certainty crumble. His face shifted from anger to calculation to something close to fear. Reverend Monroe stood. I call for an immediate vote. All in favor of removing Marcus Hartwell as CEO and initiating criminal investigation into fraudulent activities. Say aye. Aye. Director Okoye, aye. Pastor Williams, aye. Reverend Monroe. One by one, board members voted. Some hesitated. Some looked at Marcus with pity or disgust. But the votes kept coming. When the count finished, 19 had voted for removal. 4 abstained. Only Raymond Cole voted against. The gavel fell. Marcus Hartwell was no longer CEO of Hartwell Global. He sat frozen, his empire collapsing around him in real time. Security entered the room. The board secretary read the formal termination notice. Marcus was escorted out of his own building, past employees who watched in stunned silence, past the marble hallway where Grace had knelt in prayer. Grace stood at the window, watching him disappear into a waiting car. Chen appeared beside her. "How do you feel?" he asked. Grace thought about her grandmother, about David, about Maya sleeping peacefully last night for the first time in weeks. "I feel," she said slowly, "like I can breathe again." The story dominated headlines for weeks. Faith defeats fortune. How one woman's prayer toppled a billionaire. Grace's face appeared on magazine covers, talk shows, podcast interviews. She declined most of them. Marcus Hartwell faced multiple investigations: fraud, accessory to manslaughter, evidence tampering. Raymond Cole was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in David Okonkwo's death. Both men hired expensive lawyers and denied everything, but the paper trail was undeniable. Hartwell Global restructured under new leadership, a board selected, CEO committed to restoring Harrison Hartwell's original vision. They offered Grace her job back as Director of Legal Compliance, with a salary triple her original pay. She accepted on one condition: she could work remotely 3 days a week to spend more time with Maya. They agreed immediately. Grace's first act as director was creating a company-wide religious expression policy. Clear, protective, respectful. She named it the Dorothy Okonkwo policy, after her grandmother. The three foundations maintained their investments, now confident the company aligned with their values. They established a scholarship fund in David Okonkwo's name for children of construction workers. Maya's school principal called Grace personally to apologize for the harassment Maya had endured during the lawsuit. Parents who demanded Maya's expulsion now sent apologetic cards. Grace forgave them but didn't forget. On a Saturday morning, 6 months after the board meeting, Grace drove to the cemetery where David and her grandmother were buried. She brought flowers, white roses for David, purple irises for Dorothy. She knelt between their graves, her knees pressing into soft grass. "I did it," she whispered. "I found the claws. I stood up. I won." The wind rustled through nearby trees. Grace felt peace settle over her like a blanket. She thought about the hallway in Hartwell Tower, the place where Marcus had mocked her, where cameras had captured her humiliation, where her prayer had seemed like weakness. That hallway was being renovated now. The new CEO was installing a meditation room, a prayer space, a quiet sanctuary for employees of all faiths. Grace had designed it herself. She stood, brushing grass from her skirt, a dusty rose dress Maya had picked out. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed. "David Chen." "Grace, you have a minute?" "Always." "I got a call from a woman in Ohio. Her employer fired her for wearing a hijab. She saw your story. She wants to know if we can help." Grace smiled. "Send me her information." "We'll figure it out." She hung up and looked back at the graves one more time. Then she drove home, where Maya waited with her homework and a new astronomy book. The world kept spinning. Injustice kept happening. But Grace Okonkwo had learned something powerful. Faith and knowledge weren't weakness. They were weapons, and she knew exactly how to use them. 6 months later, Grace stood before a packed auditorium at Howard University School of Law. Students filled every seat, their faces eager and skeptical in equal measure. "They mocked my prayer," Grace began, her voice steady and clear. "Marcus Hartwell thought faith was theater. He thought I was performing. But prayer isn't about performance. It's about remembering who you are when the world tries to erase you." She clicked to the next slide. Clause 14.7b, projected large enough for everyone to see. This clause saved me. But the clause didn't write itself. Someone, Harrison Hartwell, believed that business needed a moral foundation. He built protection into the architecture of his company. And 40 years later, that protection mattered. A student raised her hand. Ms. Okonkwo, what would you tell someone facing impossible odds? Grace smiled. I'd tell them what my grandmother told me. Every contract is a weapon or a shield. Read everything. Understand everything. Never trust that powerful people have your best interests at heart, but trust that somewhere in the system they built, there's a flaw. Find it. She showed the audience a photo. Her grandmother in church robes, eyes fierce with intelligence. Dorothy Okonkwo taught me that faith without action is hope without strategy. That knowledge without courage is just information. That the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be erased. The students applauded. Grace fielded questions for another hour. About legal strategy, about surviving public humiliation, about balancing motherhood and activism. Afterward, a young black woman approached her. Miss Okonkwo, I just wanted to say thank you. My boss makes comments about my church attendance. I've been afraid to speak up. But watching you fight, it made me realize I can too. Grace took the woman's hand. Do you have your employment contract? Yes. Read it. Every word. Know your rights, then speak up. And if you need help, call me. She handed the woman her card. That evening, Grace picked up Maya from after-school astronomy club. Her daughter chattered about nebulas and gravitational waves. Grace listened, asking questions, marveling at the brilliant child she'd raised alone. At home, Maya did homework while Grace prepared dinner. The apartment felt warm, safe, whole. Before bed, Maya asked, Mom, do you still pray in hallways? Grace thought about the question. Yes, but now I'm not afraid of who's watching. She tucked Maya in, turned off the light, and walked to her own bedroom. On her dresser sat 3 photographs. Her grandmother, her husband, and herself on the courthouse steps after the board meeting, fist raised in quiet victory. Grace knelt beside her bed, hands clasped, eyes closed. She prayed for wisdom, for strength, for all the people still fighting their own Marcus Hartwells. Then she stood and looked out the window at the city lights, glowing against the dark sky. Somewhere in that city, someone was being mocked for their faith. Somewhere someone was being dismissed for being different. Somewhere an empire was being built on arrogance, and somewhere a clause was waiting to bring it all down. Grace smiled. Justice was patient. Truth was inevitable. And faith, real faith, was unshakable. She whispered to the night, Mockery reveals fear, but truth reveals everything. The city breathed around her. The story was finished, but the work had just begun.